They call them fun boys. They'll say, we gotta have some fun boys in the section for Busta.
What about Busta Rhymes? I've definitely seen quite a few people not too happy about your story about Busta Rhymes.
But ain't nobody saying nothing to me.
I never heard of him.
Model dude, like a model guy. He be doing like some rapping and stuff. His name Don Benjamin. I'm out with Don Benjamin. And the club we ended up going to, Busta Rhymes in there. Well, I knew about this like in 2012. I knew about this in 2012.
50 Cent just dropped something that has the entire internet rewinding and replaying. Rare footage allegedly showing Busta Rhymes putting Orlando Brown and several other up-and-coming artists in their place, and the timing couldn't be more interesting. Because while everyone's been focused on the allegations swirling around Busta lately, this footage shows a completely different side of the story. One where Busta isn't the one being called out, but the one doing the calling out. And 50 being the one to surface this right now, that's not an accident. The footage reportedly comes from the mid-2000s, back when Busta was still considered untouchable in the industry, and Orlando Brown was riding high off his Disney fame. According to people who were there, Orlando showed up to a studio session talking reckless about veteran rappers, and Busta happened to be in the building. What went down next became legendary in certain circles, but the footage never made it online until now. And 50 Cent, being 50 Cent, decided the world needed to see it.
There's countless videos of Busta Rhymes getting mad at females for just being girls. This girl touched him one time, he go crazy, throw a drink on her and everything. See what I'm saying? Like, what? Why you getting mad at females? You go to these guys, they in the club, go to their section. It's all men in the section.
But before we get into what actually happened in that room, we need to understand the context. Because this isn't just about one heated moment. This is about the culture of hip-hop in the 2000s, when respect wasn't negotiable and saying the wrong thing to the wrong person could end your career before it even started. Back in 2005 and 2006, Busta Rhymes was operating at a different level than most rappers. He had the hits, the respect, the longevity, and most importantly, he had a reputation for not tolerating disrespect in any form. People who worked in studios during that era have said Busta moved like hip-hop royalty. He didn't just show up and record. He commanded rooms. And if someone stepped out of line, especially someone younger or less established, Busta had no problem checking them immediately. This was the era when Busta was coming off massive albums like The Big Bang and still had that raw energy that made him one of the most respected voices in rap. He'd already put in decades of work, from leaders of the new school all the way through his solo career, and he'd earned every bit of recognition he had. Studios back then operated differently too.
If Busta ever tried to phone me, hit you with no delay, so what you saying, yo? Silly with that 9 milli, what the devil, yo? Yeah, I do his better than him. He better not play with me. I will and perform Busta Rhymes' show. Look, man, if they try to say that if you ever thought that the Busta Rhymes was better than me, you crazy.
There wasn't the same social media buffer that exists now. If you had a problem with someone, it got handled in person, face to face, and everyone in the room would bear witness to it. That's the environment Orlando Brown walked into, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Orlando Brown, on the other hand, was in a weird transitional phase. He was still known primarily as Eddie from That's So Raven, but he was trying to pivot into music and wanted to be taken seriously as an artist. The problem was Orlando's approach didn't match the environment he was entering. According to people who were around him during that time, Orlando would show up to industry events acting like his Disney fame automatically translated to hip-hop credibility. And that attitude eventually put him on a collision course with someone who wasn't having it. Orlando wasn't the first young actor to try making the jump from television to music. The early 2000s were full of attempts like that, some more successful than others. But what separated the ones who made it from the ones who didn't was usually their willingness to humble themselves and learn the craft. Orlando, by multiple accounts, wasn't in that headspace. He wanted instant credibility without putting in the groundwork, and he thought his name recognition would be enough to carry him. In hip-hop, that approach almost never works, especially when you're dealing with people who've been grinding since before you were even on TV.
And I'm walking across the street and Busta Rhymes just grabbed my hand. And he holding my hand. Now, I ain't know it was Busta at first. You know, Busta Rhymes tall. I'm sure I came up to about right here. So the first thing I noticed was this big ass flip mode chain that was blinding me. So I look at the chain and I'm like, and I look up, I'm like, oh, what's up, Busta? What's up?
The studio session in question allegedly happened at a popular recording spot in Los Angeles. Multiple artists were working that night, and the energy was relaxed until Orlando arrived. Witnesses say he came in loud, talking about how certain rappers were overrated and how he could out-rap half the people getting major deals. At first, people laughed it off because Orlando had a reputation for saying wild things. But then he allegedly started naming names, and one of those names was Busta Rhymes. The atmosphere in the studio that night has been described by people who were there as typical for that era. Producers working on beats in one corner, artists writing verses in another, engineers fine-tuning mixes, and a general sense of creative energy flowing through the space. These sessions would often go late into the night, and it wasn't unusual for multiple projects to be happening simultaneously. People would drift between rooms, collaborate spontaneously, and the whole thing felt like a creative hub where anything could happen. But that creative energy could turn tense real quick if someone violated the unspoken rules of respect and hierarchy that govern those spaces. When Orlando started running his mouth, people initially gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was joking. Maybe he was just trying to fit in by talking tough. But as he kept going, it became clear he was serious, and that's when the mood started to shift. Some people tried to subtly signal to Orlando that he should probably tone it down, but he either didn't pick up on those signals or chose to ignore them. Either way, he kept talking, and eventually his words made their way to the one person who definitely wasn't going to let it slide. Now, Busta wasn't even in the main recording area when Orlando started talking. He was in a separate room working on his own project, but sound travels in studios, and someone who heard what Orlando said reportedly went and told Busta directly. That's when everything changed. According to the footage that 50 Cent posted, Busta walked into the room where Orlando was sitting, and the whole vibe shifted immediately. People who were there said you could feel the tension before Busta even said a word. Orlando, sensing something was wrong, tried to play it cool, but Busta wasn't interested in small talk. He allegedly asked Orlando point blank if he had something to say about him. And when Orlando tried to backtrack, Busta cut him off. What happened next is what really has people talking. Busta reportedly went into a full breakdown of what real hip-hop credibility looks like, using himself as the example. He talked about grinding for years before getting a deal, about earning respect through skill and consistency, and about understanding the difference between fame and respect. And then, according to multiple sources, Busta told Orlando that Disney Channel success doesn't mean anything in a recording studio if you can't back it up with actual talent and work ethic. People who were in that room have said Busta's words weren't just directed at Orlando. They were a lesson for everyone present about how the game works and what it takes to survive in it long term.
Finished. This is the father of the joint venture deals, the label deals, that's right, the production deals. That's right. This is the father. I'm gonna keep it a buck. Big up Dallas Austin because he pulled this all up. But when he did it, it was the complete shifting of the clowning. We've never seen it before. The same way. There's been a lot of greatness after. They added to the floors of the skyscraper. He designed the foundation for that skyscraper.
Busta allegedly broke down his own journey, talking about the years he spent perfecting his craft before anyone knew his name, the rejection he faced, the dues he paid, and the respect he had to earn from his peers one verse at a time. He made it clear that nothing was handed to him, and he wasn't about to respect someone who thought they could skip those steps just because they had a different kind of fame. The lecture reportedly lasted several minutes, and throughout the whole thing, Orlando barely said a word. Some people in the room said you could see the realization dawning on Orlando's face that he had made a serious mistake. Others said he just looked shocked that someone was actually holding him accountable for the things he'd been saying. Either way, by the time Busta was done talking, the message had been delivered loud and clear. Not just to Orlando, but to everyone else who was watching and learning from that moment. The footage shows Orlando sitting there, visibly uncomfortable, while other people in the room stayed completely silent. Busta wasn't yelling or being physically aggressive. He was just delivering a reality check that Orlando clearly wasn't prepared for. And the way Busta broke it down, it wasn't even about defending himself. It was about teaching Orlando how the industry actually works and why talking reckless can have consequences.
We come from a very homosexual era of hip hop as well. There was a radio personality once upon a time. Her name was Wendy Williams, and she was practically burned at the stake for talking about such. And now it's all come full circle.
But Orlando wasn't the only person Busta allegedly checked that night. The footage also shows Busta addressing several younger artists who were in the studio. People whose names aren't as well known, but who were apparently riding the same wave of misplaced confidence. Busta made it clear that respect in hip-hop isn't given just because you have a record deal or a little buzz on the internet. It's earned through years of proving yourself, and anyone who doesn't understand that is setting themselves up for failure. The way Busta handled those other artists is particularly interesting because it shows this wasn't just about Orlando specifically. This was about a larger pattern Busta was seeing in the industry at that time, where younger people were coming in with entitlement instead of hunger, with expectations instead of work ethic. Busta had watched hip-hop evolve from the streets to the mainstream, and he was protective of what that evolution meant and how it should be respected. He wasn't trying to gatekeep or prevent new talent from rising. He was trying to make sure that new talent understood what they were stepping into and what would be required of them to last. Now fast forward to 2025, and 50 Cent decides to leak this footage right when Busta is dealing with multiple allegations and public scrutiny. People immediately started asking why 50 would drop this now. Some think it's 50's way of reminding everyone that Busta has always been about respect and discipline in hip-hop, even if his personal life is being questioned. Others think 50 is just stirring the pot because that's what he does best. Either way, the timing is deliberate. What makes this footage even more interesting is how it contrasts with the Orlando Brown we've seen in recent years. The Orlando in Busta's studio looked young, humbled, and like he was genuinely absorbing what was being said to him. The Orlando we've seen in viral interviews over the past few years has been erratic, making wild claims about celebrities, and seemingly disconnected from reality. People are now wondering if that moment with Busta was one of the last times Orlando was checked by someone with real authority in the industry, and whether losing that kind of grounding contributed to his later behavior. There's something tragic about watching that old footage now and seeing Orlando in a moment where he could have learned and grown, knowing what would happen to him in the years that followed. Multiple people who knew Orlando during his Disney days have said he was dealing with a lot behind the scenes.
He put out those pictures of the dude pulling his pants down, and it looked like some gay act that was going on. He got on the phone. He said, let me tell you this. When I get back to New York City, if she's on the radio station, he's talking to a radio executive. He said the same thing to he said, nobody that I deal with, nobody that I know is gonna do anything with y'all, no business at all. It ain't gonna be no artist, no nothing gonna come. He's telling people that at a radio station. When we got back to New York City, Wendy Williams was in Philly at a new station. Wow. That's the power he had.
Things that the public didn't see and that he wasn't equipped to handle. And when you combine that with the pressures of trying to transition careers, the lack of proper guidance, and the industry's tendency to chew people up and spit them out, you start to see how someone could spiral the way Orlando eventually did. That studio moment with Busta might have been a turning point that Orlando simply wasn't ready to recognize or act on. The footage also reignited conversations about how hip-hop handles disrespect. In the 2000s, if you said something out of pocket about a veteran artist, you were likely to get confronted face-to-face. There was no hiding behind social media or publicists. You had to stand on what you said, and if you couldn't, you got humbled quickly. Busta's approach with Orlando is a textbook example of that old-school mentality, and some people are saying the industry needs more of that energy today. The difference between then and now is stark. Today, someone can post something disrespectful online, get 1 million views, and never have to answer for it in person. Back then, words had immediate consequences, and those consequences usually came in the form of a veteran pulling you aside and explaining exactly why you were wrong. Some people see that as a healthier system because it kept people accountable and maintained standards. Others see it as intimidation that prevented legitimate criticism and kept power concentrated in the hands of a few established voices. Both perspectives have merit, but what's undeniable is that the culture has changed, and moments like what happened between Busta and Orlando simply don't happen the same way anymore. But not everyone sees it that way. Some people watched the footage and felt like Busta was being too harsh on someone who was clearly out of his depth.
Shout out to Wendy Williams, the first woman to uncover the homo thugs. That's what these down low was called when Wendy first started talking about it in the 90s, the homo thug. She talking about Diddy.
And then what's the stuff that's happening to Wendy Williams? You think this is all connection too?
Of course. They've been waiting. He's been waiting. He was waiting for Kim. Remember? He was waiting. The casket was ready. She was literally casket ready.
They argued that Orlando was just a kid trying to figure out his place in a new world, and that publicly dressing him down like that could have done more harm than good. This debate has been playing out in the comments under 50's post, with people split on whether Busta was protecting the culture or just flexing his power over someone vulnerable. The other artists in the footage haven't been identified by name, but industry insiders claim at least 2 of them went on to have moderate success in music after taking Busta's words to heart. One person who was allegedly in the room that night said Busta's lecture changed how they approached their career, making them focus on craft over clout. That person described it as one of the most valuable lessons they ever received, even though it was uncomfortable to sit through. 50 Cent's decision to post this also raises questions about what else he might have in his archive. 50 Cent has been around long enough and connected enough to have witnessed or recorded countless behind-the-scenes moments that the public has never seen. And if he's willing to drop footage from nearly 20 years ago, it's safe to assume he's sitting on other material that could surface whenever he decides the time is right. Anyone who's followed 50 Cent's career knows he plays the long game when it comes to information. He's held onto stories, receipts, and footage for years, only releasing them when they'll have maximum impact. Some people see this as strategic genius, while others see it as petty and manipulative. But regardless of how you feel about his methods, you can't deny that 50 Cent knows how to control a narrative and keep himself relevant by dropping bombs at exactly the right moments. This footage is just the latest example of that strategy in action, and it's working because everyone's talking about it. The question that keeps coming up is what 50's endgame is with this. Is he genuinely trying to defend Busta by showing another side of him? Is he trying to distract from the allegations Busta is currently facing? Or is this just 50 being 50, stirring up drama because he enjoys the chaos and knows it keeps eyes on him? Based on 50's history, it's probably a combination of all three, with a heavy emphasis on the entertainment factor. Because at the end of the day, 50 understands that controversy drives engagement, and engagement is currency in the social media age. The internet's reaction to the footage has been mixed. Some people praised Busta for maintaining standards and not letting younger artists disrespect the culture. Others pointed out the irony of this footage surfacing now, when Busta himself is facing criticism and allegations. And then there are those who think the whole thing is overblown, arguing that what happened in that studio was just typical industry behavior and not worth the hype 50 is trying to create around it. Orlando Brown hasn't publicly responded to the footage yet, and given his unpredictable social media presence, it's hard to say if or when he will. But people who have followed Orlando's trajectory over the years see this footage as a missing piece of the puzzle, a moment that helps explain how someone with so much early potential ended up on such a turbulent path. If Orlando does respond, it could go in any number of directions. He might acknowledge the moment and talk about how it affected him. He might deny that it happened the way it's being portrayed. He might use it as an opportunity to make more wild claims about the industry. Or he might say nothing at all and let the footage speak for itself. Given Orlando's track record, predicting how he'll handle this is basically impossible, which is part of what makes this situation so fascinating to watch unfold. The internet is essentially waiting to see if Orlando will provide context, pushback, or just more confusion to an already complicated story. What's clear is that 50 Cent knew exactly what he was doing by releasing this now. Whether it's to support Busta, to distract from other narratives, or simply to entertain his followers, the footage has accomplished its goal. It's got people talking, debating, and revisiting an era of hip-hop when confrontation was direct and consequences were immediate. So what do you think? Was Busta right to check Orlando and those other artists the way he did? Or was it an abuse of power disguised as mentorship? And why do you think 50 decided to leak this footage now of all times? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit subscribe because this story is far from over.